Good morning, everybody. So today I'll be telling you guys about my story, about MinorMynas, and a few different points I have about what this session is called, Kids Changing the World. So my story started a few years ago when I was 10. Back then, my Chinese was terrible, even though I was learning Mandarin since I was about 2 or 3, and went to tutoring almost every week. My Mandarin still couldn't get to the level I wanted it to be. I couldn't talk to anyone as I wanted to, and after a few weeks of pause, I'd forget it all. So my mum sent us to Taiwan for 1 month to see how that would help. And during that 1 month period, we were going to lessons, and it wasn't just going to a lesson and forgetting it all. But because we were in an environment like that, we were able to actively use what we learned and talk to others, whether it was making friends, just ordering food in a restaurant, or going out to play. By the end of the month, my brother and I could confidently speak to someone, and we saw a marked improvement. So I forgot about that, and a few months later, I came across a kids' entrepreneurship competition, which I found fascinating, because before I saw that competition, I thought entrepreneur was just an interesting word to spell. So I got 2 of my classmates, and we were talking about what to do. But on the very day we were submitting the deadline and giving in our idea for the competition, they dropped out. And I was left with 2 hours to come up with what exactly I was going to do. So I was sitting on the dining table, just thinking. And suddenly, that experience in Taiwan came back to me. I wondered, if that experience was such a marked contrast to what I did in the past, why not bring that experience online? So that we kids worldwide can learn a language in a more effective way, since all of us have to go through it at some point, as well as being able to utilize our free time more productively. So I entered a competition with this idea and spent the next few months learning about what a business was, from how to get revenue all the way to how to pitch. So towards the end of the competition, we were given the opportunity to speak at a huge government-led startup event in Hong Kong, where Elon Musk was speaking. I decided to give it a shot because, well, it sounded interesting. So I spent the next 3 weeks practicing non-stop. My mom helped me back then to write the pitch, as frankly, I did not know what to do. And I spent weeks practicing day and night, memorizing it, till the point I could do it backwards. That proved to be a huge, huge advantage. On the day when I was speaking, my slides crashed. My clicker completely failed to work, and my slides came right down. My microphone went glitchy. I think I would have panicked if I didn't memorize it as well as I did. But since I was able to do so, I continued, and I think I did a fairly good job. The one lasting impact of the day, apart from starting MinorMynas, is the fact that I'm not inclined to use PowerPoint anymore, as you may have noticed. So after the presentation, a lot of people approached me, including one guy who went, "This is a great idea. I'd love to mentor you if you wanted to take MinorMynas to the next level." Of course, I jumped at the opportunity. So 2 weeks after the competition ended, I was in a coffee shop in Causeway Bay talking about what a business was and how a startup can go to what one could define as success. So he broke the entire process down into tiny, tiny baby steps. And it wasn't just the time he spent in me, but it's more of the belief that MinorMynas could change the world that got me to think, why can't I do this? So I went with the first step, customer feedback. So when people ask me about when I'm working on an app, it's more of a, do you immediately go to coding? Or do you immediately go to developing? And the short answer is no. There's a very long process that goes behind it. And let me walk you through it. So our very first step was to get customer feedback. We went online, went to Facebook, and got a bunch of kids to volunteer through the parents. And we spent 2 weeks going through video calls with different kids to see how it would work to do a video call to exchange languages. In short, it was a failure. We noticed that when we got different kids, like from 3 to 8-year-olds, to get together, it was super awkward. We saw this kid having their mom whisper behind their ear exactly what to say, which was bizarre, honestly bizarre, all the way to the kid who ran away in fear of talking to others. We realized that a video call wasn't the best mechanism to get language learning going. So what would? We went back to the drawing board and started thinking. And back then I came across a book called 0 to 1 and Sprint. 2 books, actually. And this described the process of getting ideas and understanding what your customers truly want. We went to look at their hopes, dreams, and fears, as many people say. And we wound up doing a customer feedback board where we would get what exactly parents and kids want, get them into different rows and columns, and as a result, go further and realize what features could adequately match all of them to create a cohesive app. So more customer feedback, more trials, and by the time we were happy with it, we were about 6 months in. And back then, I didn't really realize how much work we actually put it through. Once we reached that step and we decided to go to a developer, it was more of a, wow, we actually did quite a lot in this time. So that's how we decided to actually get started MinorMynas, after 6 months of customer feedback. So we went to a local developer and asked them to help us turn this into reality, because even though I've been learning how to code, it is really not up to that standard yet. And we wound up going through 6 months of development, and our beta app launched in 2017. Here we reach another failure story. After we launched, I was excited. You know, we've got this app out, we've reached so far, we can do a lot now. And we wound up with 4 users. Me, my brother, and 2 kids, one from the US and one from Taiwan, who had stumbled upon our app while browsing the App Store. That was a nightmare. While we spent every day chatting with these kids, we couldn't quite boost the numbers. And it was confusing, because we were wondering, how on earth do we get to do this? And at that point, I even reached a point where I told my mom, I want to quit this. This is impossible to deal with. We've been going through for a few months. Let's stop. But then I started thinking again about MinorMynas and what we really wanted to achieve. I realized that my vision for MinorMynas was something that could really change the world. And I realized that these hard times, as my mentor had mentioned, failure is inevitable, but it's really the passion, the idea that your idea will change the world, that will take you through this period. So we kept on plugging at it, and I started pitching to more people, I went to more events, started talking to more people during business meetings. Slowly but surely, we were making progress. And we finally reached a breakthrough point when the BBC suddenly contacted us out of the blue. And when I say this to people, they usually think it's a coincidence, like you were lucky, they suddenly contacted you. But there was a lot of work that went through it in the background. Whenever you talk to someone, you never know about the connections, what might happen next. For all I know, it could have been that one random meeting I had with that person talking to others, and through that chain, we reached that point. But it did happen. And right now, MinorMynas has members from more than 50 countries all over the world. So let me tell you what I'm doing. MinorMynas is a global kids community where we set out to bring kids from all over the world together in one safe and trusted community trusted by parents, for us to exchange different skills and to make friends from across borders. On our app, we see so many interesting topics here, all the way from how to deal with climate change, how to stop it, to how to deal with bullying, what's autism like, and even how to bring awareness to cultures through language. MinorMynas was so much more than that tiny language learning app that I envisioned when I was 10. So for our next steps, right now we're working on child safety. Bearing in mind that social media is inherently unsafe for kids, based upon the suicides that we've seen, based upon the things we're seeing kids encounter, all the dangers they're seeing. MinorMynas wants to be an alternative, to be somewhere safe where kids can have fun, make friends, and do something productive. To make sure we're safe, because that's a very important point, right now we're making all the efforts to comply with every child protection law, whether it's the Child Protection Act from the US to GDPR from the EU. In the future, we'll be implementing machine learning and AI to screen out predatory behavior and to make sure kids are as safe as possible, screening out bullying at the earliest possible stage. We will also bring in different online learning programs to kids from different providers, so kids can learn different things, and to make sure MinorMynas is a safe haven for learning and having fun. So now that I've told you about MinorMynas, let's talk about innovation for a second, because I think that is something that's crucially important. When people ask me about entrepreneurship and why I'm doing it, I usually have a few answers. So let me talk to you about that. I think that innovation is one of the most important things we can deal with in this world. Why? 2 reasons. First, it is what makes sure that we progress as a species. From everything we see here on stage, from the table to a microphone, to the phones you have probably in your bags, it is all due to innovation based upon individuals to make sure that we do better. We need to carry on with that. By being stagnant, we're just staying put. But innovation is what brings us to the next major event. I think that we can all have a role in this. Not just me, not just the entrepreneurs that you see on stage or worldwide, but all of us have the opportunity to do so. The other reason why I think entrepreneurship and innovation is important is because it is so accessible to everyone. It is something that we can all do. And the other thing is, I've just repeated myself, sorry. I also think that innovation creates a problem-solving culture for us all. Why is this important? Too often, we become complacent with our environments, thinking that faulty aircon is just the way it is. We can't deal with it. But this is something that we can actually do to change it. There's something we can do to make it better for us all. And this session today is called Kids Changing the World. So let me talk about the younger generation, not just kids under 18, because I'm not sure all of us fit into that category. Why are we important to innovation and change? I think there's a few answers to this. First of all, for the people who say that kids cannot do something, I'd say that we are the people who are going to lead the world in the future. At one point, all of us were kids. And if it's a question of experience, yes, we don't have experience, but you can let us start early so we can gain those experiences by the time we grow up. There are so many more things we can do when we've got time and years to accomplish what you adults have been able to do within your work lives. If we're able to start in school, in secondary school, or even younger, then just imagine how many experiences, how much knowledge we can gain by the time we're, let's say, 60. The other reason why I think we can play a huge role in change is because of a change of perspective. There are many issues. So let me bring up an example, Greta Thunberg. How many people have heard of her? Raise your hands. Quite a lot of people too. So for those of you who don't know, Greta Thunberg is a 16-year-old climate change activist who is working to help us make sure the world is a safe place to live in by making sure climate change doesn't have a huge impact on the way we lead our lives. She has a change of perspective. Why? Because she is younger. Because she's just a bit older than me, we're able to recognize that the older generation has had their flaws in treating the situation that it is today. And because of that change of perspective, she is able to find new solutions, new ways to talk to others that, let's say, a 50-year-old person may not have realized. A change of perspective and us being able to gain experiences is something that's crucially important and one huge role I think we can play in the world. So how do we nurture this? I think it's through education. But right now, the education system is fundamentally flawed. How? A few points on this. First, let's talk about the skill set difference. The word education comes from the idea that we're able to get what we need to succeed in the future. So education, in the broader sense of the word, is preparing for the future. How does that play out right now? Especially in Asian countries, we're being trained to become test-taking machines, to be able to ace every test, get 100%, and therefore you're doing well. So what does that teach you? 2 things, rote memory and discipline. How does that help you in the future? Not much. Why? Right now, robots are becoming a bigger place in the world. Automation is becoming something that is a norm rather than a gradual change. This means that hard skills, like becoming research lawyers, are being laid off by the second. A lot of people who are memorizing things will find troubles when they grow up. Because hard skills, we just cannot compete with robots on this. It can memorize things in a millisecond, whereas we might take months to do something. So what can we do instead? We can do 2 things. I think it takes 21st century thinking skills and generalism. What are these? 21st century skills are a skill set universally agreed upon by educators and other people worldwide as the skills that we need to survive the future. What are these skills? While it does have certain hard skills because, you need to know something, it is mainly focused on soft skills like creativity, collaboration, creative thinking, that kind of stuff. I think that these are fundamentally important because if we're going to live in a world with robots where hard skills are being mastered by the second, what makes us able to compete is truly our human nature. By being able to be humans, that is the distinction. It is not becoming ridiculously fast. It is not about becoming such an expert that any other human can't rival you, but it's about being human, being able to think critically, work with others. That is how we collaborate with robots rather than compete against them. The other thing about skills that we learn in schools, like discipline and rote thinking, is that it actually has other active harms upon us, especially when we're young. Have you guys ever wondered why suicide is the top killer amongst kids from my age to pretty much the end of university? For students, suicide is the main killer. And in Hong Kong, 1 in 3 students are suicidal or have thoughts about committing suicide. Why is this? The pressure of schools. If you're being berated for not getting 100%, if you are being told you are not good enough for failing math, this is going to take a toll on your mental health. Being told that you are a failure is something that my friends, I have faced when I was younger. And that is not good. This is the active harm the education system has upon us. So what can we do instead? 21st century skills and generalism. I've told you briefly about 21st century skills, so what's generalism? Generalism is basically knowing a lot about different fields, but not necessarily being an expert in every single one of them. While soft skills are great, I think that is important. There's nothing we can do if you've only got someone who can collaborate and communicate. You need to know something as well. So generalism is being able to know a lot of stuff and being able to apply nuance to different situations. So how can this play out? There's a term I heard about recently called digital humanities. And this takes coding and philosophy and mashes them together. 2 subjects that I previously thought was very difficult to place together. Being able to apply ethics to how social media works, how data companies take your data and harvest them. This is something that is important and something we'll need in the future. And being a generalist, being able to know different things and apply nuance from all of them to one problem can make things so much easier. I think that it's important for this to reach the mainstream at some point in the future. But for us, it's a little bit late, isn't it? So I've got a few thoughts on how we can make a change for ourselves. A few different points. First, to de-emphasize test scores. I know most of us should be still in university, and that means probably tests, probably quizzes, probably different exams. And I think that is something that's innate, that when we don't get 100% or we do worse than expected, that we tend to kind of get angry, get disappointed in ourselves, and, lose hope. What can we do instead? I think that it's important for us to zoom out and realize, put this into perspective, and focus on other things. For example, last term, I got only a 60-something on Latin, and initially, I was extremely disappointed. But I started to think about what happened and how I could improve in the future, rather than obsessing over that score. I realized that I didn't put enough time into studying, and that's what probably led to the low test score. So what we could do is to de-emphasize that score, put it into perspective, and think, what can I do in the future? How can I improve my critical thinking? How can I improve my note-taking, rather than obsessing over the score? Second point, to actively find opportunities to practice soft skills. For me, things like debating has helped a lot. For example, being cooped up studying for tests just turns you into a robot. So why not do something else? Why not explore other opportunities, like debating, since I love it so much, where you can actively collaborate, where you actively employ things like critical thinking. And that can help you so much more than just being cooped in a classroom or just studying after hours. The third thing we can do is to explore other options. Schools are perfect at teaching us the limitations, but not the possibilities. Too often, we are hemmed in by different stereotypes, whether it's set by the school, our peers, our parents, the people around us. We need to know that we can burst out of that that we can do something else. For me, entrepreneurship was a bizarre thing. A lot of my family members are still going, what on earth are you doing with this MinorMynas thing? Why is that important? And to that I tell them exactly what entrepreneurship is, why I think it's important, and why it is my decision to do it, and why they ought to respect that. It's important for us to know that the only path we see ahead of us, set by schools and society, isn't necessarily the only one. We can jump out of there and explore other options. So let's go back to the idea of people changing the world. And for that, I've got a few different opinions. First, I don't think that impact is limited to a single individual. It's not limited to a certain group of individuals, but all of us have the power to make a change. All of us have the capacity to influence people around us, our friends, our family. And I think it is important for all of us, not just me, not just other people, but all of us to work out how can we make the world a better place. What can I, as an individual, do to make life better for us all? If we're able to do that, that will make a huge impact. A few other points. Kids changing the world. It is the duty of the older generation to nurture us kids. We are born leaders. We are born even creative geniuses. According to a study conducted by NASA, they were looking at creative capacities to work out whether we are born with it or if it's learned over time. And amongst 4-year-olds, 98% of them were considered geniuses in creativity. Can anyone guess that rate amongst adults? 2%. Schools are dumbing us down, and older generations were the people who did that. It is their job to make sure that we kids are ready to face the future. It is their job to make sure that we kids are being nurtured to be able to make an impact in the future, to be creative, to be able to be a functioning individual in the 21st century world. But if that can't happen, what can we do instead? As young people, we've got the opportunity of time. Unlike my mom, who's got a family, taxes to pay, sometimes a job, it is important for us to use this time without many duties or obligations to be something that we want to be. When we're still young, we don't have to make a choice immediately, but we can explore. For example, coming to this humanitarian affairs is something that we can explore to work out what we're truly passionate about, and not just what society has set out for us. I think that coming to here is a good first step to explore your passions, to explore what we want to do, and to know that we as individuals have the capacity to make a difference in the world. Thank you so much, and if you have any questions whatsoever, please do ask.
Hello, I'm Jonathan over here. So from Singapore, I'd like to ask, actually I want to ask a question that the lady just mentioned, but it's okay. I'd like to ask, what can you do? You say that out of 1 to 3 students in Hong Kong actually suffer from mental disorder due to education. Am I right to say that?
Can you please repeat
Sorry
that properly?
That. So about 1 out of 3 students actually suffer from mental disorder. Am I right to say that? So saying that actually the Hong Kong education is very stressful. Am I right to say that? Yeah. So what can we be done to all over the world to actually reduce this stress as a whole nation in terms of education?
I think it's more of a cultural shift that we need to do slowly. For example, if Hong Kong suddenly abolishes homework, which I doubt, it'll be strange for parents. Parents would just be thinking, what on earth do we do now? Time to chuck them off to tutorial centers. I think it starts with us. When we have our own kids, maybe many years into the future, that we implement different strategies with them. We can't shift overnight, but it means that we can do it slowly, and slowly change the way we perceive education, slowly change the way we perceive success as kids and in the system.
Thank you very much. By the way, you're my role model. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. My name is Hae-Rang Choi from South Korea, Korea University. Thank you so much for your inspiration, and I was so touched by your story. And I wonder have you ever been faced some prejudices or bias as a young female entrepreneur? And if so, how do you handle such situations?
Absolutely. So let me tell you about an investor meeting I had earlier this year. So I was pitching MinorMynas, talking about what I think needs to be done, and suddenly he halted me in the middle of my sentence and said, please, please be softer. You're intimidating me. I just looked him in the eye and carried on. I guess, so the thing I have to say is that we can't control how other people perceive us. The only thing we can control is the way we act.
Wow.
There will always be people who tell you that you can't, not only because of your gender, but probably your age, where you're from, your race, your ethnicity. The important thing is just to prove them wrong by continuing to work. So that's my opinion on this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Over to this side to our speaker, Ryan.
Hi, I'm Ryan from Canada, and I appreciate you talking a lot. I appreciate you talking a lot about the potential of youth and being able to learn from experiences and grow, but I'm curious on your thoughts about what are the greatest strengths of youth over adults that you have while you're youth, and what your perspective on what those are and how we can best utilize them to have an impact.
So two things. I think that generally we tend to be more optimistic when we're younger. Before we get exposed to the adult life, we tend to be so much more open. So there are two things that I read about, and that's convergent thinking and divergent thinking. One talks about the ability to limit ourselves, and that's something that's seen mostly amongst adults. This being able to second guess yourself every time you have an idea and go, no, that's not good enough. But when we're younger, we tend to be so much more willing to chuck every idea out, and that's something we should keep. The other thing that I think is important is the change of perspective, as I mentioned earlier. When an adult is an adult, it is difficult for them to think like a kid again, think about more creative or unusual solutions to deal with problems. And I think that's one advantage that we kids have.
Thank you.
Or young people.
Thank you. Over to this side.
Hi, my name is Abdul Rashid. I'm a Nigerian. I represent University Technology Petronas. First of all, I would like to congratulate you for a wonderful speech and a wonderful achievement. I see you bigger in the near future. My challenge or my concern is this your 21st century ideas. We've been challenged recently about the coming of the robots, that they are going to come and take over our places, you know. You just made it a little bit, increase the challenge when you said the robots can memorize in seconds, you know, and humans can take days, some months, you know. So I'm kind of curious, from your own 21st century thinking, what do you think we humans can do to outsmart the smartness of the robots when they come?
I think we need to see them more as a tool rather than something that we must compete against. So when we talk about automation, it is something that's inevitable. Even if robots don't take over immediately, it is an eventuality that will happen over time. It's not like all of us will be out of a job tomorrow, but maybe by the time our kids grow up, they'll be in a world where humans have a completely different role. I think the role we need to play is to work with them, to work out and apply human thinking, to apply the way we think to different problems that robots can help us solve. For example, many years ago, when we were creating, let's say, water bottles, it took human labor to put them into reality. But with automation, humans took a step back and focused on the design rather than being able to find people to create it. It's just more of a skill set change rather than a, oh my God, humans are out of jobs now, what are we going to do?
Sure. That's really wonderful, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take a question from over this side.
Hi, Hilary. My name's Kate. I'm from the University of Newcastle in Australia. This convention has spoken a lot about the people in this room and youth beyond this room being the future leaders. However, you've been a leader within your own time and as a child. And I was wondering, how do you attribute your 21st century skills and concepts such as generalism to that leadership that's taken place, not in your future, but in your present? And the second part of my question would be, how would you define leadership in the context of using and applying the 21st century skills and generalism?
I think that being a leader, I wouldn't classify myself as one yet, because
I think we would.
it's still extremely early days. But I think that being a leader, being the person with the vision, and to inspire people to do it. I really detest the idea of having an old school boss saying, disciplining, saying, this is all wrong, that type of thing. I vehemently disagree with that. I think that it's more about inspiring people to do something, to create a vision that people want to follow. And I think 21st century skills are all about soft skills, how we work with one another. And I think that's how a leader would operate today and in the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Over to this side.
Hello, Lei Hou. I'm also from Hong Kong. I'm Vanessa from Chinese University of Hong Kong. And I want to ask, I know you're having the homeschooling rather than the local education in Hong Kong. But as a local kid in Hong Kong, I suffer a lot by the public examination. So I want to ask, as an entrepreneur and the stakeholders in the society, what can you do, or what can the government can do to deal with the roots of the educational problems in Hong Kong, except from creating extra support like language apps? So what can we do to deal with this problem? Yes, thank you.
I think Hong Kong really has a deep-rooted problem in this aspect, and the government cannot do very much to change it immediately. I was talking to some people who are creating experimental school curriculums in the past, and they did have conversations with the government, and in their policy, they do have different things about having kids be exposed to shorter days, have more playtime, but it's very much more of a cultural thing rather than a governmental policy issue. As I mentioned earlier, I think it takes more of a cultural shift to get that done. I mean, Hong Kong parents are sometimes very, very exam-oriented. My mum faced that when she was a kid, and that's why she insisted that she sent my brother and I to international schools, so we didn't face the same pressure. And I think that it just means that Hong Kong parents, Hong Kong students need to slowly realize that there's so much more beyond the world of homework and tests.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We do actually only have time for 2 more questions from each podium. I'm sorry once again, but please do contribute throughout the rest of the day.
Hello, I'm also from Hong Kong. I'm Hermia, also from Chinese University of Hong Kong, so sorry that you have to answer 2 Hong Kong questions. I'm really happy that you brought up the Hong Kong education system. So I have been studying in local school for my primary and secondary school, so 12 years of suffering from these spoon-feeding educational ways. So I myself do find that I have become a lot less creative than my international schools friends. I have tried hard to fix this, but it's really hard. Do you have any ways to address or to help people to get creative again, especially for kids, especially in Hong Kong? I really want that our kids to be creative, not being like a robot. In my school, people tend to ask, is this going to be included in the exam? Instead of asking, why would it be like that? So I really want to stop this phenomenon, and yeah, thank you.
I think Hong Kong really does have, I think it's a problem in Asian countries, not just Hong Kong. I mean, I love my hometown. I don't want to go, everything is wrong. But I think it's more of a problem amongst all Asian countries,
Agreed.
where I'm sure people in the audience can agree with this too.
Yep.
Yeah. That we're all being forced into this system. The way we can change it is for us to know that there's a problem and for us to work out how to fix it. Whether it's talking to schools, talking to them about how they can make a change. For example, in Hong Kong, there's a school called TEDxTinHauWomen, where that school is taking an experimental approach to education by bringing in different projects, by bringing in different ways for kids to learn by doing rather than by listening. And even so, on the TSA, they still got very high scores. So I think it takes more people like that for us to change the system, but slowly but gradually. And to become more creative, I think it just takes about considering other possibilities by going for different opportunities, exploring wider to work out what's out there. And I think slowly that can become more of a creative source. Though I'm not an expert, I didn't go to local schools.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, how are you? My name is Zakaria Al-Hashmi, and I'm from Sultanate of Oman. I appreciate your comment that our educational system is fundamentally flawed, and we have to take actions in order to resuscitate this educational system and make it adaptable to the future we aspire our kids to be in. The thing is, I'm a teacher, okay, and I teach kids, and I have volunteered several times. I love my kids so much, and I want my kids to be just like you, working, to follow their dreams, to be strong. And I don't believe in tests, me myself, okay? And I'm trying to use other means of assessment other than giving my kids tests that do not really represent who they are, do not represent their personality or anything of that sort. The thing is, tests are still convenient. I mean, I have taught a class that includes roughly 60 students, and I rejected the fact that I needed to give them a paper test. So I gave them an oral test instead, but my head was about to explode. I had like a back pain and other problems that I faced. So it is not that I don't care about them, I do, and I'm willing to give every ounce in my power to help my students to be better in the future. But sometimes there are many hurdles us as teachers face. Do you have any special advice for us?
I think that tests can have a lot of harms, but I think that the biggest harm that comes with it is the way we perceive it rather than the test itself.
Yeah.
I understand that it's convenient, and I know that it is. So I think that the way we need to perceive tests is more of a means to see how you're doing, rather than an indicator of success or failure. I think that when we perceive it that way, having tests is not the problem. It's just the way we take having a test. So it's not a, I'm gonna die if I don't get 100%, but to have everyone know that it's just an indicator of how you're doing now. I think that's what's going to change, and I think that not abolishing tests, because ultimately it's necessary, but working out how we can perceive it differently, that will make a difference.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Hilary. I'm Georgia from Australia. Thank you for your speech. My question is around, you spoke about entrepreneurial thinking and soft skills and how important they are, but we've also had a lot of questions about kind of entrenched problems within the educational system and beyond. I think sometimes it can be easier to start something new and come in from outside than work hard to fix what is broken from within. So my question is, how can we value and better encourage entrepreneurial thinking within these existing systems to challenge and make that change?
I think that entrepreneurial thinking is something that's a bit of a buzzword these days, and it seems pretty ambiguous. I think it just comes down to one concept: solve the problems you see. And I think that within a school system, talking about problems, how to solve them, and to foster that kind of mindset will make all sorts of differences. And I think that I think it's easier for us to go to the parents rather than the school system to see how we can change it from there. Because ultimately, it's the parent who has the most vested interest in that individual child. And I think that by talking about how can we change these problems rather than leave it be, I think that's what's going to change and to encourage more entrepreneurial thinking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, hello. I'm Patel Salman from South Africa and a delegate from the University of Venda. First of all, I would like to applaud you for a tremendous contribution. And I personally think that in the coming future, you're the next Bill Gates.
I very much doubt it, but thanks.
Yeah, so basically, let me just stick to my question. Our country is much more focusing on the fourth industrial revolution, basically wherein the automation will be in charge of the daily basic work, wherein now I personally think that this will create a high unemployment rate and people won't be having work anymore. So what's your take on that?
Well, I think that whenever there's an industrial revolution, there will be massive unemployment, and that's something that is inevitable. So I think we need to start with the education system and make sure kids are prepared to have the skill set that's needed for after the revolution, rather than to train them to become just like someone else and find difficulties getting a job. I think that unemployment is something that is inevitable, but one thing we can do is called upskilling, which is becoming a trend amongst adult markets worldwide, and that's about teaching new skills, how to relearn how to learn, kind of a repeated word thing, as well as how to adopt 21st century skills. I think that upskilling, whether it's provided by government or individual employers, will make more of a change and help people shift from one industry to the other, as well as being able to make sure that education system is not preparing kids for a world 20, 30 years ago.
Okay, no, thank you, future Bill Gates.
We have one more question here.
Hi, Hillary. My name is Olivia. I study here in Malaysia, and I've been in local school all my life, since the beginning, Chinese primary school, local high school, and I only went to college in a private institution. So I'm familiar with the exam culture. I'm familiar with the Asian education culture. My family is traditional and also non-conventional in the sense that we did pay a lot of attention to exams, but also on the other things. So while I recognize what you say about the Asian culture being how exam learning is sort of leading to like a brain drain and less in creativity, I also do want to just note the fact that as a local graduate from a local high school, I do not think that creativity is something that is only taught in international schools, and local students have less of an advantage when it comes to that. That's just my personal opinion. I feel that by going to an international school, there are things that are part of the curriculum and the culture that they have an advantage over local students, but I think there is an advantage by going through the local route as well, and Asian education, especially the discipline. And as for exams that you mentioned, since you were saying that exams maybe it would be better to use it as a way to check on how you're doing, how then do you have an idea of how, let's say, we are going to grade our performance for, let's say, university applications? So I don't really 100% agree with what you say that exams should only be used as a measure of how well you're doing, because how then will we get a grade on, like, what I said, university applications, job applications, and all? I mean, it's an ideal situation where we're all university students, that we all don't like exams, but I think there is an importance still in it being part of our education system. Okay. Thank you.
So I agree to some degree with what you said. It is impossible for us to get rid of exams immediately or to use it simply for that purpose overnight. And if we look at university application systems right now, while tests are considered, imagining a lot of kids have the exact same score, the way they gauge them from then on out would be interviews, working out their individual qualities, working out how they perform under different situations. I think that slowly the exam bit can be phased out, and that we should take a bigger emphasis on interviews and seeing how kids perform under situations. I think that's the way this trend is shifting, and I think that exams will continue to play a role, but they should be slowly phased out. And as for academic performance, I think that the idea that kids must take exams to be motivated is kind of a crazy thing to have. I understand that it's something that's prevalent in Asian communities, but I think that it's an attitude that we ought to phase out. If we're learning just for the purpose of exams, then that really takes out it makes it harder for us to look at learning as something that's lifelong, rather than something we get rid of and over and done with once the final exam is done with. So I think that's the general trend, and there needs to be an attitude shift as well.
Thank you. We will have to cut it off there. Thank you so much for your contribution.